what did the crucifixion mean? I mean, how is it possible that God sends his son, right? And he gets killed. Now, I can imagine those disciples on the road to Emmaus in Luke, the end of Luke, dispirited, discouraged, giving up hope, going back to Galilee, and wondering about those kinds of things. Was it possible that this was an accident? A breach in the divine plan? Or was there a divine plan? How could God, that's the question, how could God allow his Messiah to die before his work was done? It must have been something like that, because we have so many protests, particularly in the book of Acts, that specifically deny that it was an accident. And so people must have been pondering that his death was an accident. But then, I guess, saner heads prevailed, and or at least the theologians or what have you prevailed. And so they went to, among other passages, they particularly went to Isaiah 53, one of the suffering servant passages, and argued that the death of Jesus happened like Isaiah had prophesied it in 9, 4, 12, and 6 in chapter 53. 2 Peter even alludes to this in his writing, uses some of the language out of that particular psalm. The context for those numerous denials was the suspicion that it was an accident. So how do you explain the resurrection? The crucifixion? What sense do you make of that? The dominant idea, I think, in the New Testament is the idea that Jesus died for us, died in our behalf. Mark 10:45 in the Gospel, Son of Man gave his life as a ransom for many. And that's you're in this area at any rate. If you turn on a TV evangelist or a radio preacher, you're bombarded with that idea. Paul's idea, however, is probably the source. 1 Thessalonians 5:10. While we were sinners, Christ died for us. But there are other related ideas about the crucifixion in the Gospels. While the author held to this dominant idea of Christ dying in our behalf, they were exploring new ideas. For example, in Hebrews 9, Christ's death begins a new covenant. That's sort of a different slant. And in 1 Peter, beautiful little segment in 1 Peter 2, Christ's death frees us to live as he lived. Not that he died for us, although the writer of Peter holds to that idea. So you can see there's some experimentation going on even with the idea of the crucifixion and the death of Jesus. Another idea is that doesn't have this idea of dying in your behalf, is the death of Jesus is his moment of glorification or exaltation. Particularly in John, as Moses lifted up the serpent in the wilderness, same word as Moses exalted the serpent in the wilderness, so must the Son of Man be lifted up, exalted, same word. His death was his exaltation, and what it accomplished was the driving out of the world ruler. John 12, now is the judgment of this world. Now shall the ruler of this world be cast out, and I, when I am lifted up from the earth, will draw all men unto myself. He said this to show what kind of death he would die.